Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for the Be Water Smart webinar, Landscape Design with Cost in Mind. A few things as we get started. I wanted to introduce Sule Tranquilli with Tranquil Gardens, Marcia Jimenez Scott with Marcia Scott Landscape Design, and I'm Cheryl Buckwalter with Landscape Liaisons. So I will be presenting this webinar, and Sule and Marcia will be joining me for technical things and answering questions that you enter into the chat and so forth. So that's the next thing I wanted to mention. We are going to have our microphones and cameras off during the webinar. Please enter your questions into the chat. Marcia and Sule will monitor those and answer as many as possible during the webinar for you. And then we will have a question and answer time at the end. Also, the Regional Water Authority will send you a brief survey if you wouldn't mind answering that, because your input is always valuable to us. And then go to bewatersmart.info/webinars to sign up for more. And then the word about technology. We live in a virtual world these days, it seems, and things will happen. And so we have tried to set up a plan A, B, and C in case something does happen. So we just ask that you please bear with us should that be the case. The webinar is being recorded and you can watch it again at bewatersmart.info. And also when you see this piece of paper in a hand on one of the slides, that lets you know that there is a handout. And that's available at that same website. So the City of Sacramento is our co-host for this webinar. And I wanted to share with you that they have 5 rebate or incentive programs for you, as you can see here on the screen. In particular, the turf conversion incentive program does give a rebate for a landscape design if you would like to have a landscape design consultation. So you can learn more about that. I'll show you the website address on the next slide here. And so you can learn more about that at sacwaterwise.com. Also, if you have any questions, you can email the City of Sacramento at this address. And if you want to find out, you're wondering how much water you use, or if you're concerned that maybe you have a leak or your irrigation system might not be operating as efficiently as perhaps it should, then you can call or email and ask for a WaterWise house call. They are free. And also, if you're not a resident in the City of Sacramento or a customer of the City of Sacramento Department of Utilities, you could also go to bewatersmart.info and find out who your water provider is if you need to know that, as well as what sort of incentives and rebates that they have. So on with our presentation. What we're going to learn today is about the benefits and the value of landscapes, basics for creating landscape design, some options and cost of design services, as well as we're going to have some actual landscape projects that have been installed and what those materials and construction costs cost, for example. And then, of course, we'll end with where to get some help and resources, as well as questions and answers. So I would like to sort of set a foundation and understanding, if you will, that the costs that we've included in this presentation are based on our experience and relative to project-specific estimates. And we will give some materials, for example, some ranges of what those materials might cost. And so, you know, what it says here about the economy can impact what a landscape design and installation may cost, also the economy of scale. Do you have a very small project or a very large project? Because sometimes there are minimums to what orders can be. So it might be more cost effective to get 10 yards of a material instead of just 8. Of course, that depends on if you have size, the space for that, as well as the need for that. Also, workforce availability is important. One thing I wanted to point out is that the Regional Water Authority does sponsor a training program called the QWEL, Qualified Water Efficient Landscaper Training. And you can find out more about that at qwl.net. And what's good about that is that they train professional landscapers and landscape professionals how to install design and install the types of irrigations that are very water efficient and utilize resources wisely. We'll be talking more about that. So I'm going to talk next or upcoming about individual designer fees, contractor fees, that sort of thing. So first of all, I wanted to share with you that Souley Marcia and I design based on what's called the holistic approach to creating landscape designs. We want landscapes that will improve and become more beneficial over time. They're watershed friendly, meaning that they reduce or eliminate pollutants that go into the waterways, drought resistant, and support wildlife habitat. So, but first of all, visual appeal, curb appeal is very important and it can impact the value of your home. And so we want to pay attention to that. And then consider what the actual cost is of something in your landscape versus the value of the items. And a benefit, of course, with landscaping properly, putting in wonderful shade trees and so forth, there are environmental benefits and habitat enhancement, as well as just enhancing your overall quality of life. We do want to keep in mind, though, that water, there is never enough to waste. And I wanted to say one thing about cost in this regard is there have been some studies and articles and professionals who have reported that you can anticipate about 10% of your home's value going toward the landscape. So you might keep that in mind. So let's explore some of the values of having a design. So that having a design, it's kind of a roadmap. It will help you examine the options, help you learn all about what's best for you and your family. And then, of course, determining your wants versus your budget, or all your wants and needs in line with your budget. Have you had the conversation with yourself and with your family about what is the budget for our landscape? That will help a lot in helping to guide you and make decisions. And that's what landscape designers are here to do as well. Also, by having a plan that is very clear, the saying about dealing with apples and apples when you're asking for quotes instead of apples and oranges, it will really help your bidding and estimation process be very clear. And then having a plan helps you to chart your course of action. You want to meet your goals and objectives, right? And that's why we're creating a plan. And I like to quote the Stephen Covey from the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. This is only part of the quote, but begin with the end in mind. And that's what the plan does. It will help you keep in mind what your ultimate objectives and goals are and help you in your decision-making process. So we also want to protect our investment, as I just said, the curb appeal, the aesthetics of your home and your landscape. You want to increase your value. Also avoid costly mistakes. By planning out what you're going to do, you can be orderly and organized in how you approach your landscape design and installation. And then, of course, you want to be able to install your plan on budget. We don't want any big surprises at the end of this. And so thoughtful planning and finding out more about what your specific plan will cost to implement will really save a lot of time. As you can see here, there is the option, of course, to do your landscape installation in phases. And one thing that I would say to keep in mind is that sometimes that can add to the overall expense of your landscape. Because as I gave an example of delivery of some materials that, if you need 8 yards and you get 10, that can be more cost effective. It's the same way in phases. So for example, if you are going to phase and you're putting in, for example, maybe some permeable concrete or permeable pavers, which I'll show you examples of later. If you want to phase your plan, put that material in wherever it needs to be in your landscape. So that's just a tip about this. And then also you want to allow time to assemble your team, determine who you're going to work with and what your schedule is. So if nothing else, you could start with a consultation. So a landscape design consultation might cost between $75 and $120 an hour. And that really, it's a range that I mentioned. We want to give some ranges here. And then, the the services that you can expect and can ask for, you maybe just need a consultation. Maybe you want a sketch. Maybe you want more of a comprehensive plan that has all the plants identified, the numbers and the quantities that you're going to order. What are the other services? Do you want to go with the landscape designer to nurseries to look at and pick out plants together? So there's a variety of services that can be provided, and that plays into that range. So basic design concepts. Our objectives are we want to create, install, and maintain this environmentally friendly and watershed friendly landscape. So that means keeping rain and irrigation water, such as if there's overspray, keeping that on your property by shaping the soil, using water catchment, creating a rain garden, which I'll show you an example of in a little while. And we want to use irrigation equipment efficiently and implement strategies that will help us more easily manage our irrigation system. Then consider the hardscape. The hardscape is the non-permeable, or excuse me, that's not correct. The hardscape is the non-water consuming material. And then the softscape are the plants. Those are plants, softscapes. They absorb water. They require water. And that might be with the exception of some very low water use California native plants, but that's a whole nother topic. But that's the difference between hardscape and softscape. And then you're determining and figuring out what your objectives are. Do you want to grow food? Are you going to be composting? Would you love to create, habitat, birds, bees, all those great beneficial insects like lady beetles, ladybugs, and also you want to have plant diversity. And we'll show an example of not having plant diversity and having plant diversity. And then what are your objectives relative to choosing the hardscape and the softscape? So some more basics, the next thing you want to do is evaluate your property. What is your soil type? What kind of grading and drainage do you have? Are there issues? If there are, you want to correct those as soon as possible because they don't go away. And then what's your existing irrigation system like? Can it be upgraded or do you need to maybe start over because it's really outdated and it has a number of issues going on? You'll also want to evaluate which direction is your home facing. Are you, is your front door in the front of your house facing north, which means you're going to have more shade than the south and southwest. So you want to think about that. And then building codes, regulations. Do you live in a community that has homeowner association guiding regulations or CCNRs, covenants, credentials, and regulations? And then thinking about your team, who will design, install, and maintain it. Because as you're designing it, you want to think about the materials you use and what do they require to maintain them. Also, when you're measuring, you're going to have property boundaries. You're going to have the footprint of your home and the buildings, where trees are located. Observe how and where water moves onto your property. Like when it rains, where does it flow through? Is there a lower area that it might be beneficial to create what I was mentioning about a rain garden? And then you want to observe what you want to highlight or what you might want to hide. Do you have something next door that is not really pleasant to look out your windows and see? So you want to consider how you can maybe camouflage that. So let's pause for just a moment because I'd like to remind you to enter questions into the chat, please. Okay, next we're going to go on to some landscape plans, two projects that have actually been installed, and look at some cost estimates. So this is a before project. How do you think we might be able to improve this landscape? Before it was weekly lawn care, shearing of shrubs, as you can see under those windows, overspray and runoff, not very colorful. And this lawn here creates what's called a monoculture. It's not giving any diversity and supporting, providing habitat. I will say also that when you're thinking about keeping an existing tree like this one in the center, during construction, you want to be clear that those tree roots get protected. So keep things like that in mind. So here's an after. This landscape was designed by Colleen Hamilton. She used to live in the Sacramento region, but a few years ago she moved out of state. But just consider what we've been talking about, keeping the water on the site, using water efficiently. We'll be talking about more materials shortly. And then also, what are these long-term reductions? This type of landscape, you can tell that we don't need to do that shearing and hedging of the plants. They're spaced where they can grow to mature size without all of that. So here's some estimates. So the landscape design itself cost $1,150. Site preparation, removing the concrete. Now there was a driveway that was existing here that had cracks in it. And so the client wanted to redo the driveway. And so that took quite a bit of money there. However, they saved a lot with keeping some of that concrete on site, which you can see in the picture right here. They've recycled some of that concrete to make like a low wall there. And you'll see another picture here in a moment. The irrigation system, along with a smart controller, was $2,760. And then, so that's another good reason to think about contacting your water provider to find out what kind of incentives they have for you. This new concrete driveway cost $9,600. So that was a larger ticket item. It was very important though, because before there was not a walkway up to the front door. People just had to go onto the driveway and then go to this entrance. So good to keep in mind. So that concrete, a large part of it was repurposed, as I said earlier, right there, and we've got some more over here. And then they also put this little stepping stone path in here that leads like to the hose and so forth. So that was $1,270. Then we needed to bring in some topsoil, 6 yards of mulch. That was $1,300. 63 plants were planted. That was $1,800. And then so the total project was $20,750. Keep in mind, over $9,000 of that was the driveway though. So again, we've given these plants room to grow. We are irrigating efficiently, and in the next project, I'll show you some more irrigation equipment, and then plenty of compost and mulch. And I'll talk about that in a little bit. So here's a side-by-side view. This used to be lawn all the way across here, both landscapes. And now you can see this will grow in more and fill in. And, as I said, a lot less work, a lot less to maintain, a lot more water efficient. All right, here's another project for us. This project was by the city of Roseville. For 2 years, they had a contest, the Sustain the Gains contest, because they wanted to encourage people to continue to save water, even after our last significant drought occurred. And so it was a contest where anybody, any citizen or resident in the city of Roseville could enter the contest, and they were randomly selected, but based on a short essay that they wrote about how they are working to save water. So it was called Sustain the Gains. So this is Martin Carrion. He is with Landscape Symphonies, and he is using a sod cutter to remove this lawn here. Also, you can see on the right, this is what it looks like during the demolition. We are going to have to remove some of this concrete edging that was taken out. And unfortunately, that will have to go to the landfill. But I wanted to let you know also that here's that symbol. So if there is a lawn removal methods handout that compares various types of lawn removal options and cost ranges. So I call this, with the irrigation system, the in-ground infrastructure. It's in the ground. As you can see, these PVC pipes are going under the sidewalk. What sometimes people will do is they'll actually use like one larger PVC or a drain pipe or something to put under the hardscape, under the sidewalk, under a driveway, so that the pipes and any electrical wires can go in at that time through there. It also, if you have to change or expand your system for some reason or make a repair, it's easier to get those PVC pipes in and out of there. As you can see, this irrigation system was estimated at $1,435, but the equipment was generously donated by Hunter Industries. Now here, Martine has installed new valves. There is one valve for every hydrozone, and what that means, a hydrozone is the grouping of plants by their water requirements. And so we also take into consideration their sun. So if I have an area with all low water use plants that love full sun, I'm going to group those plants together, and then they're going to be irrigated on one valve. And so as you can see here, Martine is flushing the system. After it's been put in, after the pipes have gone in and all of this equipment, he checks it out, cleans out the system before he covers in these trenches. So one thing that's very important is to protect soil from compaction. And so a few days before they were doing this work, we had gotten a light rain. So what Martine did is he put down these big sheets of plywood so that they could roll the dolly across there when they were putting in these moss rock boulders to disperse the weight and to reduce the compaction. Also, you'll see over here, these stakes. What they do is when they, according to the plan, and if the plan says this plant's going to get 3 to 5 feet wide, they're going to give that plant plenty of room, and they'll measure out how far apart those plants need to be. In the front here, this is called straw wattle. And what that does is it helps to prevent any erosion of soil or compost or mulch during construction. We don't want those materials going into the storm drain system. Now, here's the irrigation drip lines and the creek bed. The lines that I was speaking to you about earlier, so these are called inline drip lines, or you might hear them called dripper lines, but it's tubing that they're actually emitters, drip emitters built right in. So you don't have to have the 1/4-inch spaghetti tube and all those individual button emitters that you might be familiar with. And it's laid out on a grid like this so that it is watering, the system is watering all the soil evenly, because this landscape, once it's mature, it will cover most of the soil area that you see now. Then there's a downspout back here that is being led into this stream bed. And this is part of that soil shaping that I was talking about. We've created this indentation, if you will, where the creek bed is, and then we've mounded up and we've contoured the soil so that when it rains, it slowly soaks into the soil instead of running off. And you can see what the fees were here for materials as well as labor, and then the contractor, Martine, to implement and supervise this installation. And here at the end, we top it all off, covering up this drip tubing at the back, as you can see. We're going to cover it up with about 4 inches of organic mulch. And there are so many benefits of mulch, which I'll talk about in a moment. And so here we use 20 cubic yards of mulch. So this is when the project was installed, just completed, and you can see the plants are small, a large amount of visible organic mulch, but that's okay. Those plants are going to grow in and it's going to look great. And then Green Acres Nursery and Supply donated a $500 gift card. So the residents were able to purchase these decorative containers. So this is what it looks like now, September 2018. I'll go back one, November 2017. Okay. And so now you can see we had 142 California native and drought tolerant plants installed. And here was the price of those plants. And now here's June of last year, 2019, just to give you an idea how it is growing and filling in. And there's plenty of space for these plants, so they don't require a lot of that heavy pruning. So let's look at the numbers relative to water. Before this makeover, it was estimated that this landscape consumed 44,754 gallons of water per year. After this installation, this new landscape, once it's established, because new landscapes do need to be watered regularly until they get established, and then the water can start, you can start cutting that back according to whatever those plant water use requirements are. So 11,700 plus gallons. So an estimated 33,000 gallons of water per year. That's a lot of water. So again, we want to thank Green Acres and also Hunter Industries. And if you'd like to learn more information about the City of Roseville's water efficiency programs, visit roseville.ca.us/save water. All right, let's talk a little bit about hardscapes. So again, these are the materials that do not consume water, okay? But they might be materials that let water soak in around them and through them, like the mulch and like this flagstone here, how these spaces between each paver has a DG, a decomposed granite or some other kind of gravel. And then here is decomposed gravel. You can see the dollar sign. So in this next section, $1 would be at the lower end. If you had a path that was organic mulch like this, it would be the least expensive way to go, right? Then we have our decomposed granite, and then we have the flagstone with also the gravel between it and so forth. So we want to let any water that's on our property to be able to slow down, spread out, and soak into the soil. Here are a few more examples. So on the left, I would say this would be a number two, $2 signs, because while it's concrete, they are put into forms, it's stained and stamped, and then you also have the rock around it. On the far right would probably be the most expensive, because we have these permeable pavers that have to have a substrate, which I'll show you in the next slide, to help to continue that permeability. And then in the center, these are prefab stepstones that you can get at some material yards that are probably the least expensive. So here's that example. This is a permeable paver, so the water goes in, oops, let me go back. The water goes in through these lines here, and then this is the subsurface. It's important that if you have family members or friends or whomever who have walkers or wheelchairs that they use, to make sure that the permeable pavers that you decide upon are ADA approved, Americans with Disability Acts. And so Americans with Disability Act, it should be. And that means that the spaces are narrow enough that it's comfortable enough to roll those wheels over it. So keep in mind, if you have solid concrete that's not permeable, that might be more inexpensive, but it's not permeable. And if you are going to put in some solid concrete, then talk with your licensed contractor about installing it so it has just a very slight grade or slope where any water that hits that hard surface can roll off, or sheet off, they call it, into a landscaped area or into one of those creek beds or something like that. Here's a great example. This is Sulei's front yard. She had her driveway that was replaced with part impermeable concrete and then part permeable. So really it was pervious, because she used pervious concrete that the water could go right through, which is really great. So here's her front walkway. And then she designed and had installed this patio that's right outside some windows, and also concrete was used for this low wall, which gave a nice little patio area that was not there before. And when she looks out the windows now, she sees this great sitting area as well as all those beautiful plants that were installed. So next, let's talk about edging. So with edging, here's a composite. A lot of times you might see the real slim edging, which, excuse me, I don't use because it doesn't hold its form very well. This holds its form a little bit better, but it can heave. It's relatively easy to install, and heaving with movement of soil and so forth. And sometimes they just start to lift up out of the ground instead of being level, as you can see here with the grass and the mulch. Then here are these concrete pavers that would be next up in the price level. And then here would be the most expensive of the three. Here's the compost, and then you see the grass, and there's this thin line right here, and that's called metal edging. And so it is more expensive, and it does require more skill to install, but it is very durable and lasts a long time. So that's something to consider. I'm going to take a sip of water and give you all a moment to take all this information in. So here we have recycled concrete. So there's more of that concrete that was taken out and used for this low wall. In the middle, the next step up in pricing would be this dry stack wall. These are actually natural stones, ledge stones. And then the most expensive on the right is this curved mortared, beautiful wall, and it's got water features here. So keep in mind, in this moss rock boulder, that's an added expense, and they, you pay for them by the pound. With fences, here's some examples. So the one on the upper left is pretty easy to install and easy to obtain materials and so forth. The one on the left in these panels, this is a kind of a mesh grid fencing material that's metal, more costly because we're putting more detail into the framework of it. And then on the right, we have this steel fence that would be welded, most durable, but most expensive as well. In the middle, this fence would require painting as well as the one in the upper left. So we're thinking about labor, materials, and maintenance. Another great feature for your landscape might be an arbor such as this. Here's a composite one, and then here's a redwood one. That this one would cost between $3,400 and $3,800 to put in for this size, 10 by 4 by 8. All right, let's talk about softscape. So hardscape doesn't consume water. Softscape plants do. Here's an example planting plan. That this is just what's called a street view elevation. And this is a very simple one. As you can see, plants around here, this would be mulch that's underneath this redbud, a native tree. And then all California natives and non-native, which means plants from climates that are Mediterranean type, that are similar to ours. We want to match those conditions. And then here is a list of these plants that were used, and you can see we're showing the mature size, height, and width. And I wanted to mention that all three of these plans that I just showed you are on the Roseville website, the roseville.ca.us/save water. So there's 3 planting plans there. When we think about softscape, there's all different container sizes, as you can see here. What we usually use is what's called a 1 gallon, or truly it's a number 1, which is here and here. Another real common one is the number 5, and then we might get up to a 15. We recommend that you use the smallest size possible. For example, the number 1s or the 1 gallons would be the better choice than a 15 or 25. If you are planting a tree, it would probably be better to use a number 5, a 5-gallon one. Because the smaller that they haven't been in those pots for a long time. Their roots are probably in better condition, not circling around, and they'll get established in your landscape more easily. And then be sure to select diversity. California native and non-native plants, as I said, from our climate and conditions, and also that give habitat value, that really provide food and safety and so forth for birds, bees, and others. So grouping our plants by water needs, which I've said, and then giving plants room to grow. Here's some examples of what these plants could cost. If you had them installed by a contractor, you can see a number 1 gallon would cost probably between 25 and 35 per plant. And then if you did it yourself, you could probably get that plant for $8 to $12 and install it yourself. So a significant savings. And just note that these numbers are not for specimen plants, really highly prized or more challenging to obtain plants. And so, excuse me, here are a few of the photos of the plants that are available on this one plan. We use 36 number 1s, 4 number 5s, and the cost was $1,225. And again, here is the website for you to go and learn more and access those 3 plans. So I've talked about rain gardens. So this is a very special feature. Basically, a rain garden is a depression in the ground that you have created. Again, shaping that soil to slow, spread, and sink the water. So for this site preparation, you can see this indentation, if you will. Solid drain pipe was used from a downspout, which you can just see a little bit in the corner. It's connected to a drain pipe, goes under the stepping stone path, and then comes in here, right here in this section, and flows in. And rain gardens, when they're designed and installed properly, the water does not stay in them. Some people have expressed concern about, mosquitoes and that sort of thing. And that's not the case. There are certain calculations that you take into consideration when you're installing your rain garden. And there's online information about that, and your contractor can help you with that, as well as your designer. So this costs $745. And you can see also that there are some irrigation lines in here. And we do that because we want to provide for the plants during establishment, as well as if we have a drought year and a drier than normal winter, we want to be able to provide those California native plants and others the water that they need. This is what this rain garden looks like. Isn't this wonderful? You wouldn't even know that there's this depression in the soil. Let me go back for just a moment. As I already said about the properly designed, but look at this statistic from the U.S. Geological Survey. 1 inch of rain from a 1,000 square foot roof can yield 623 gallons of water. And that's really nice water that can be used in your landscape. So let's talk about some water features. For example, we can go low tech with a bowl like this, or we can get more sophisticated. So the price of water features can be, really broad ranges, but they're also very nice because they can muffle sounds, give a cooling effect, provide water source for bees and birds and pollinators. And I always recommend keeping in mind that electricity would be needed, or unless it's one that you don't have electricity to and you just clean it out from time to time, or else maybe you have a solar panel or something that is providing electricity. Here is a rainwater tank that is at the Elk Grove Rain Garden in Elk Grove. And if you have not been there, I highly encourage you to go there. It's just wonderful. You can see all kinds of permeable hardscape materials, how they've, arranged plants and spaced them, and all kinds of California natives. So rainwater capture, that's the barrel, instead of shaping the soil and having the water go there. You can use multiple ways of keeping the water on site, though. You might have a rain barrel in one way, shape the soil in another area, and put a rain garden in. Keep in mind, our city of Sacramento has rebates and incentives. Do you want to have edibles, compost bins This is Sule's puppy Cece, which is so cute. But edibles are very important. And so think about that when you're creating your plan. Again, please enter your questions into the chat. We're just going to say a few words about soil because it's not just dirt. So we recommend watching the Symphony of the Soil video. Healthy soil is wonderful. It provides plants with nutrients, helps plants be more healthy to resist pests. We want to protect that soil from compaction, as I've said, and use organic matter to enrich it and provide nutrients to the organisms in the soil. So speaking of which, compost and mulch. So with mulch, you might be able to get it free. And I'll show you an example next, but you might pay up to about $40 a yard for it. Also, when you're purchasing mulch, when you're purchasing compost, you want it to not have a strong odor. It should not. It needs to be very well aged, and it needs to have no offensive odors at all. So here's examples of mulch. On the left, this is what's called an arborist mulch. So you might see tree companies that are chipping limbs or trees that have been taken down, and they break them up into all different size particles, which are great because then they break down, decompose at different rates. This is another one that's called a walk-on mulch. So, you might consider that. Many, many benefits of mulch: helping to retain soil moisture, helping to reduce the growth of weeds because the sunlight's not getting to them, helping to moderate the soil temperature, which is beneficial to soil organisms as well as plant roots. So many benefits. This is an example of a landscape that another one that Martine was working on. And I wanted to show it because it shows these drip lines here, shows how we're covering this up with mulch. He's used what's called that straw wattle, as I said, for the earlier example landscape, around the perimeter to keep everything in place so that during construction, the soil, the compost, the mulch doesn't flow off. And once the project is done, there you have it. You remove the straw wattle. So a few bottom line benefits. Sustainable landscapes really are beautiful and functional. We want to think about that function. And when your landscape is well designed, installed, and maintained, it can use 80% less water, which is quite a lot. And that's potable drinking water. Also, it can require 60% less maintenance. Who doesn't want to do less maintenance in their landscape? And then also produce 50% less waste to the landfill because you're not pruning and shearing. So there have been studies that have shown that sustainable landscaping and the practices that we've been talking about increase property values by up to 7%. Also, homes with street trees increased in sale price from $7,000 to $13,000 because of the shade, the energy savings, and so forth, and the other benefits. And trees that are planted closer to your house, but yet a safe distance away, even added more value. So your sustainable landscape really is, it can be, and it is beautiful and functional. So quickly, here are a few resources for you. As if you want, in your planning process, you're going to think about what you want to do, can do, and so forth. So the Association of Professional Landscape Designers, you can go there to find a designer. Just enter in your zip code and they will give you some options. The Qualified Water Efficient Landscapers, as I mentioned earlier, QL.net. And then the Watershed Wise Landscape Certified Professionals are also great resources for you. When you're thinking about contractors also as a larger resource, there's the California Landscape Contractors Association, as well as landscape architects. If you need to have structures constructed, for example, in your landscape, you're going to need construction specifications. So that's when you would want to have a licensed landscape architect, for example. Lots of great resources at bewatersmart.info. These are all free for you. And we've also provided a list of resources with links to other resources where you can find materials and equipment, plants, and so forth, and online links for the Sacramento region, materials and plants in this region. Also, you can go to this Puddle Stompers link, and so that's going to be on your resources list. And those are all available there. There are 4 landscape designs, irrigation designs, 75 plant profiles that show the plants through every season, just a lot of great tutorials and information. So we are going to get to some chat questions in just a moment. I wanted to first give special thanks to the City of Sacramento Department of Utilities, as well as bewatersmart.info. And just wanted to remind everybody to go and find out what kind of rebates and incentives there are for you. Then remember, these recordings are available and they'll be up shortly, probably a day or two, at this bewatersmart.info, and then sign up for more webinars as well. So if you want to learn more about us, just look at these slides near the end when you see the webinar. Talks a little bit about our experience. And so again, we do want to keep in mind, begin with the end in mind. So let me stop for just a moment and take some questions that have been in the chat. Let's see. Where can I get the recording? Okay, so we just want to remember that, well, I won't go back too many slides. It's at bewatersmart.info and then the /webinars. And the handouts are going to be there also. I had a question about that. So I have a very boring yard with lawns and clipped shrubs front and back. How can I get ideas about making a new, beautiful yard? Well, I hope we've given you some ideas at the City of Roseville's website. Certainly at bewatersmart.info, there is the Waterwise Gardening for the Gold Country. It's a plant database as well as example landscape plans. And then, of course, you can visit the website that I mentioned for at the Puddle Stompers. So lots of good resources there. And I will say that CalScape, CalScape.org, has a newer website that helps you create planting plans with California native plants. So that's on the resource list as well. So go to that resource. There's lots of good information there. Let's see. How do I know if my current irrigation system is wasting water? Contact your water provider and ask for a WaterWise house call. That's a good first step. Okay, so the last question, if I start planning a project, a landscaping project this spring, how long can I expect it to take? So I'm not sure if that question is about installation, because the second project that we installed was 11 full days. It depends on how well things are lined up and planned, for example. And it really depends on the season, because in the fall, it's a great time to plant and do a project. But if we start getting heavy rain events, then we're not going to want to be disturbing that soil. The other thing that question might be asking about is how long does it take for plants to grow in? So it can take a year and a half for plants to get their roots really established. Trees, it can take 3 to 5 years. And I suggest if you want to know more about trees, visit the Sacramento Tree Foundation's website, which is on your resource list. And so, as you can see from the very first plan example that I showed you, it doesn't take all that long for plants to grow in and mature. So I'd like to leave with that. And thank you very much for joining us today for this presentation. Please sign up for more. Everyone take care. Thank you.